I hate my dumb dead brother. Before I was born, my parents had another son. A blonde-haired, blue-eyed angel, by their words. A kid who was showing early signs of a genius intellect and who excelled at any given sports activity available to him. Granted, this was all before he was 10 years old, so I'm not sure of how his above-average adeptness was measured and by what metric. I only heard the stories secondhand, of course, since I wasn't even conceived until after he died. At 9 years old, the brother I never met was playing hockey with some of his many, many friends and was winning by a wide margin, I'm sure, when the ice gave out under him. Even though others immediately rushed to the broken patch with no regard for their own safety, no one saw any sign of him again after he first went under. My name is Toby, short for Tobias, but that's not really my name. It's his. My parents had me to make up for the loss of their beloved firstborn. This isn't something I've come to realize over the years. This was expressly told to me directly throughout my younger years, before every notable life event. Remember to do it like Toby would, after every predictable failure. That was not how Toby would have done it. I wouldn't say my family was abusive, even mentally or emotionally, but I would overhear them referring to me as not Toby in conversations they thought I didn't know about. I could write an entire novella about the various complexes that gave me back then, and to this very day, but this probably isn't the right place for that. Dad works in finance, I think. I never understood it and just never really cared to learn what he did. Mom is a seamstress, mostly for child beauty pageants. More often than not, I had to serve as the dressmaking dummy until I grew out of size range. Plenty of complexes. My parents had a shrine to him. Photos, a lock of hair, his baby shoes, and way too many milestone mementos for someone who spent less than a decade on Earth. There were candles, and they were always kept lit like a fucking eternal flame. By the time I was 18, my parents and myself, all three of us, had given up the facade and expected little to nothing out of me. I spent my time playing video games and hanging out at the local comic shop. Even though I was escaping into fantasy worlds, I still wasn't the hero in them. I was sorting through some of my old comics, deciding what to keep and what to sell for more comic buying money, when I heard the scream. I thought something terrible had happened at first. Right below my bedroom window down on the front lawn, the malevolent and ear-splitting roar of a large truck came to a halt close by. Then the shriek followed it. I thought someone's pet or their kid had been run over, based on the adult's wild scream of surprise that came after. As I threw a copy of Mortal Man No. 1, embossed variant cover, aside and rushed downstairs, I heard a second scream, just as unbalanced and off-putting as the first. This was when I realized that the first yell had been female, and the second was male, and that they had come from my parents. I nearly flew out the front door, my feet barely catching each front step as my ankles made attempts to roll themselves and send me face first onto the concrete landing at the end. I was on autopilot, and given my performances as an athlete, it's a minor miracle that I didn't split my lip or forehead. Again, when I fell to my knees on the grass just beyond, it wasn't an accident. It was from disbelief. A huge white pickup, truck with extended cab, blacked-out windows, and a weird, impossible knot icon on the side, had stopped in the middle of the yard, fresh, muddy tire grooves trailing behind it. The back of the truck was covered with a blue tarp, several large, identical shapes deforming the surface. Next to the truck were my mom and dad, also collapsed on the grass out of sheer shock and grasping the pant legs of a man who stood improbably tall over them. He was wearing denim jeans and a black shirt beneath a camo jacket with an unreasonable amount of pockets. A man with hair as golden as Captain Crunch and eyes as blue crunch berries. Immediately I knew. I don't know how.
I knew, but I knew that I knew, and I apologize for phrasing it that way. To Toby? I said under my breath.
Any resentment that had built up in me throughout my life took a back seat to utter bafflement. A dumb, dead brother? I could hate that guy. A seemingly magically resurrected Christ figure who existed outside of old photographs and embellished anecdotes? I had to sort out how I felt about that one. The man, the ultimate man, the real Toby, snapped his attention to me quickly, turning his eyes away from my uncontrollably sobbing parents. his face bunched up into an expression of confusion. "Wait," he said with the booming voice of Paul Bunyan. "Who's this?" "Who?" my mother asked, her tear-drenched face buried against Toby's left boot. Dad turned to see what Toby was asking about. "That doesn't matter," he remarked dismissively. "What's important is that you're home." All but kicking Mom and Dad loose of his jeans, Toby walked over to the spot where I had fallen into an unexpected state of reverent awe. He walked like a soldier, point A to point B with efficiency and determination. "Do I have a goddamn brother?" he asked in what could have been a gruff, exalted cheer or a booming cry of outrage. "No way to tell." "Yeah." I nodded as he reached out a hand and yanked me to my feet like a gorilla grabbing up a cat. "Any more brothers?" "Just me." "Sisters?" "Just me." I think I referred to myself as his sister there, but you have to understand this was a pretty big moment and thinking clearly. Wasn't a habit of mine to begin with. "Well, shit!" Toby cried out, a huge, square-toothed grin on his face. Before I knew what was happening, he had me in a bear hug with my arms pinned at my sides. He struck my back a few times, and I could hear the wind being knocked out of my lungs, like the beating of a bass drum. I think I went out of body for a moment as I asphyxiated, because I remember looking down and seeing my ragdoll body getting hugged and struck as my sock-clad feet swung back and forth off of the ground. The cataclysmic freak-out that occurred mere moments earlier was replaced by an eerie silence as the four of us sat at the small wooden table in the kitchen. Sure that Toby must be starving from whatever strange journey had been on for the past 18 years, Mom and Dad offered him any meal he wanted. He could have asked for any absurd thing, from long pig to dragon haunches, and somehow they would have bent heaven and earth just to serve it to him. Instead, he just remarked that he wasn't hungry and thanked them for the offer. I got myself a bologna and ketchup sandwich. Toby wouldn't say much about where he had been. That, or he couldn't. There were vague mentions of being carried by the frigid water, after he fell through the ice and being picked up by a person or group that happened to be downriver. I couldn't work any of it out in my head, but he spoke with enough confidence that no one had a single follow-up question to any of his half-answers. Finally, after he had clearly reached his breaking point due to all the cooing and hair-stroking, From our parents," he clapped the table with his palm and focused on me again. "You know what? We should take a drive," he announced. "To where?" I asked, only now thinking back to the very important comic book organization I had thrown aside. Toby got up from his chair suddenly, and my parents followed suit as if they were observing traditional etiquette in the court of a king. "Come on, let's get out of here," he answered, not answering. Mom and Dad chattered amongst themselves, saying that while the two of us were gone, they'd get Toby's bedroom back in order so that he had a place to stay. It didn't hit me until much later that his room had been my room, and that this meant they were going to frantically shovel everything I owned into a corner of the leaky basement. I climbed up into Toby's lifted megatruck like a toddler trying to get onto a Disney ride, fumbling and misstepping before ultimately grabbing handfuls of seat and pulling with my upper body. Even the seatbelt seemed too big, connecting with a loud metallic clack that felt industrial in purpose. "Where are we going?" I asked, swimming in the expansive passenger's seat as Toby backed the truck up without looking, made a reckless turn in the cul-de-sac and tore off down the quiet suburban street. "Burger load," he answered plainly. "I thought you weren't hungry." "I'm not." Burger load, a greasy and dingy fast food chain on the edge of town. Mostly it served truckers and vacationers passing through the rapidly aging intersection between a major highway and a slightly less major highway. I had never eaten there, and I didn't know anyone who had, mostly because no one wanted to get involved with truckers and out-of-towners when there were other local businesses to support. "There's actually a really nice diner," I mentioned, hoping to guide our path away from that abysmal corporate hole. "It's called Gordy's, and even though there's no drive-thru, they'll rush a to-go order if you're in a hurry." Toby didn't say anything and kept driving. "They have pie," I added. "Burger load has pies," he replied, furrowing his brow and shaking his head as if I'd said something dumb. "Burger load has fruit-flavored syrup in a deep-fried shit pouch." I snapped back without a second thought. "For Rayo." The first time since I'd met him, which isn't very impressive since I'd just met him, Toby let out a hearty belly laugh. "We're not going for the food." That confused me for obvious reasons. Hey, I never got your name. Toby changed the subject quickly. What's your name? It was my turn to laugh, but it was more of a bitter chuckle. Toby. No shit? No shit. Toby. What? Toby too? Toby Jr.? Just Toby. Also, Toby Jr. would have weird implications. Toby took both of his hands off the steering wheel, but kept his foot on the gas. He stroked his chin and rubbed his head at the same time. Well, that's gonna cause some problems, he finally noted. Well, Mom and Dad call me not Toby from time to time. In a eureka moment, Toby snapped his fingers, then placed his hands back on the wheel. Something that brought me great relief. Not. I'm gonna call you Not, for short. I didn't like that. At all. But speaking up for myself was a skill I'd have to study up on later in life. A long silence overtook the two of us. I say silence, but the truck engine sounded like the Indominus Rex going Super Saiyan, and holy shit, I need to get out of the house more often. As you would probably expect, of the two of us, Toby was the one to break up the droning din. What, he said, though, was anything but expected. I ate a demon. The lack of conversation took over again. I rolled my eyes upward and frowned, trying to figure out what I had just heard, if I had really heard it correctly, and what it meant if I did. Here, check this out, Toby eventually said, as if he'd made up his mind about something on the spur of the moment. We pulled over at a patch of undeveloped wooded property, driving right up to the tree line. Toby unlatched his belt and hopped out of the truck in one fluid motion, as I followed in a slower manner. It wasn't until we were both standing at the trees, wild brush raking at our shins, that I considered the idea he could have taken me out there to kill me. Images of being told to look at the birds while the barrel of a pistol was placed to the back of my head raced through my mind. Would I have to run? How would I outrun this guy of all people? How far could I get before tripping over my own shoelaces? I checked Toby for any sign of malicious intent, or any intent at all, really, but instead found the same flat, steely expression on his face that rarely changed. Then, a gurgling sound came from his stomach, followed by a sick, wet, slopping sound in his throat. His cheeks puffed out, and it was clear he had just vomited in his mouth. My eyes went wide, and I took a step back. Are you okay? Suddenly, Toby opened his mouth, a stream of dark redness erupting from his gullet like a lizard's tongue, but a one-way lizard's tongue made of liquid. I'm not the best with metaphors. Holy shit! I yelled out. Was that blood? Are you all right? Toby just pointed to the trees. As I looked over to where he was gesturing, I saw the bloody projectile barf spattered across the trunk of a pine. The wood smoked and sizzled as the blood ate through its bark like acid. Stupefied, I stared at the tree, then at Toby, who casually wiped his chin with his hand. What? He just repeated his previous statement and headed back to the truck. Ate a demon. I looked around. There was no one for at least a mile and no cars passing by. Nobody had seen this other than me. With wobbly legs and few options, I scaled my way back into the truck and buckled in. As we pulled back onto the road, a resounding thud echoed behind us. I turned back to look as Toby checked his mirror. The tree had been completely eaten through and had fallen across the road. We'll get it on the way back, he muttered. I wasn't interested in the tree. So you're never hungry. Because I ate a demon. Right. How? What demon? When was this? Why? Toby let out a tired sigh, as if it would just take too much time and energy to explain. There are 3 types of people, he explained. People who hear stories, people who tell stories, and people who live stories. I'm not type 1 or 2. By the time we pulled up to the Burger Load parking lot, I was no closer to getting the image of scarlet-tinged, watery vomit out of my head. When Toby hopped out of the truck again, I followed suit yet again like an obedient dog who wanted to go outsize. I never liked the Burger Load mascot, and I can't imagine why anyone would. A grizzled old prospector, wearing a burger helmet with a headlamp, holding a pick with a fork on one end and a spoon on the other. It honestly just looks like some random mismatched garbage a hack would come up with on the fly because he couldn't think of anything better. The chain's motto, "Hit the burger load," also struck me as generally gross. It didn't remind me of the gold rush. It reminded me of taking a shit. Ding! The bell above the door rang out as we walked in. Seeing the place nearly empty, save for one trucker toward the back, made the place seem oddly imposing, like a greasy, liminal space that smelled like stale French fries. It wasn't until I saw the lone guy at the booth that I realized there was only a single commercial truck parked outside. We stood at the door for what seemed like a minute or two as Toby stared down the trucker, unflinching, stoic, and possibly not even blinking. Completely unaware of our presence, the trucker finished his terrible meal, pulled his bloated form out of the booth, and lumbered over with a tray full of trash. He let out a belch, almost directly in my face as he passed us. "Headed north?" Toby asked the guy as he walked by. "Yeah, why?" The trucker was in such a post-gorge stupor that he noticed he wasn't alone only when he heard someone speak. "They're closing off traffic in a bit. Emergency road work. East-west is closed off too, downed power lines, and there's a tree or something. Across the road to the south. You'll be fine, though, if you hurry out." The trucker picked up his pace and pushed through the double doors. "Sounds like the fucking end of days," he grumbled. Understanding that the tree thing wasn't a random event brought me no closer to understanding the rest of what was happening. Moments after the trucker left, Toby reached down and locked the doors. He then looked back toward the restaurant floor, as if scoping the place out for anything he might have missed. "What's actually going on here?" I asked. "Shh." Toby held his fist in the air, as if signaling to fellow soldier to halt. "Are you a soldier?" I asked, just as loud. "Quiet." He quietly snapped back. Toby marched methodically to the counter where a girl with stringy black hair and a wide frown stood waiting at a register. Her uniform, a cursed brown and pea-green set of slacks, polo shirt and ball cap, seemed crusty and worn. As she spoke, however, what was most present in my mind was that it looked like she could have probably fit her fist in her mouth. "Welcome. You've hit the burger load. How can I service you?" she croaked. "What do you want, Not?" Toby turned to me, and all at once I felt like a little kid being put on the spot in front of the adults. I looked up at the smeared and fingerprinted board above the counter. I wasn't any more hungry than Toby was, though my stomach was full of bologna and bread, not the corpse of an unknowable eldritch horror. One thing did look good to me, though, something I hadn't had anywhere in a very long time. I guess I could have a strawberry milkshake. A small, sly smirk played on the cashier's face. "Shake machine's broken." My shoulders dropped, and for some reason I was legitimately disappointed, even though I hadn't intended to even be there that day. That's... Damn! So you don't have any shakes at all?" I asked in a defeated tone that even I could hear. The girl's eyes rolled back a bit, and her trembling smirk squirmed its way into a smile. I looked to the rest of the kitchen workers, some in the back, one at the drive-thru window, and another standing at a second register. They were all ladies, around the same age as the one we had been talking to, all the dark and brooding trailer trash type. For whatever reason, each one of them seemed to go a bit slack with some sort of perverse pleasure at hearing what I had said. "Get him a minor meal." Toby barked. He seemed angry at the girl, and I wanted to believe it was in some way a form of defending me. However, the fact he had ordered me a children's item didn't match up with that premise, especially since I'm pretty sure he called it a minor meal when the trademark term is minor meal. I can't explain it, but it felt that way. We sat down at the same booth the trucker had been in, and even after all that, his ass indentation was still in my seat. "What'd you get?" Toby asked as I pulled open the minor meal box. "What do you mean? You ordered for me," I said in a snarky way, making sure he knew I was at least mildly pissed about it. "Let's look it over." All right. I unpacked the box. Flat cheeseburger, a tiny carton of fries, and a plastic baggie with a toy inside. "What's on the cheeseburger?" Toby further pried. Groaning and shaking my head with annoyance, I unwrapped the burger, pulled off the bun, and showed it to him with a flippantly disrespectful flourish. "Torn and stale bun, single burger patty, 1 dot of ketchup, 1 dot of mustard, a single half pickle slice, and To top it all off, no cheese. Right, that lines up. Toby nodded. The fries? I dumped them out on the tray. I had gone from irate to curious at this point. What exactly was this all about, if the purpose wasn't just to mock me? The fry carton was underfilled despite already being a small. A few of the fries were brown, a few were green, and there was an onion ring in the bottom. God, I hate onion rings, I scoffed. You're crazy then, Toby noted. Like you fucking know, devil eater. Funny. What's the toy? I didn't want to admit it, but I was kinda jazzed to see what the toy was. At this point, it should come as no surprise to you that I am a man-child. Less than a year beforehand, I had bought the entire lineup of Zombionics toys on eBay because there was no chicken beef location within driving distance, and I had to have the complete collection. My breath was heavy as I opened the plastic containing the toy item. Not because I was hoping for something cool, which I was, but because Toby had made this whole process seem deathly important. Wow. I held the miniature action figure in my palm and studied it. A poorly sculpted little man with tiny legs, fat arms, and a crooked face. He was giving a thumbs up with each hand and wore sunglasses. I actually have no idea who this is. Toby leaned back in his chair and pulled a gun from somewhere I didn't see. Right, he said in a cold, morbid tone. Whoa! I jumped up in my seat and held my hands out at him. I'm not that bothered by it, I'm not. It's fine. In fact, this food looks great and I love the toy. No one has to die. If I could have shit myself in fear, I would have. But in that moment, I think my asshole disappeared into itself. Calm the fuck down, Toby growled. See, if you just said to calm down, maybe that'd work, I stammered. But then you threw the fuck in there and that concerns me. Toby placed the gun on the table, and after a quick glance to see if it had been noticed by the staff, he leaned in and spoke quietly. Not. Have you ever heard of the CRP Institute? No. Adastatus? No. Toby frowned, and breathing in through his nose in the most I don't have time for this way anyone has ever inhaled, he gave in and did a sliver of storytelling. The CRP Institute is an organization that deals with anomalous objects and entities. Oh, yes, like all the ones you have heard of. When I went through the ice that day, nearly 2 decades ago, I wasn't rescued right away. I washed downriver, got snagged on an old submerged shopping cart, and I stayed down there for about a week. Under the water? Under the ice in the water. I wouldn't call what I did screaming because there was no air in my lungs, but I was there for a hell of a long time. Unable to die no matter how much I wanted to. Hell of a thing wanting to die at 9. Toby. Picked the gun up again and clicked what I assumed to be the safety. When some ice fishermen found me down there, they called 911. The people who showed up weren't cops or EMS. I sat back down and covered my mouth out of shock at the revelation. It was the PCP Institute, I said in a barely audible whisper. The CRP Institute. Yeah, Toby corrected me. I've been the property of a bunch of weird nerdy science goofs for all this time. They've tested me, run me through trials, can't die, good at everything. Never lose, even games of pure chance. They call me CRP 7422, the Golden Boy. Pretty quickly, they needed me so much that I was starting to write my own rules. Bedtime, dessert before dinner, all dessert and no dinner. Sounds like a kid's dream. Yeah, I feel like I got suckered into it, though. I've been doing, I guess you'd call them missions for them. Getting to do what I want, having adventures to distract me, I started to forget I had a past life, that I had family. When I got called out here, it all came flooding back and I took an unapproved detour back home. I don't know what to say, I said. Toby popped out of the booth and started walking back to the counter at a steady clip. I barely had time to follow. Don't say anything at all. Just help me kill this thing. Hearing those words, I instead strongly considered unlocking the front doors and running as far as possible. Did you enjoy your meal? The grim little dirtball, at the register asked, sounding incredibly sarcastic. No, it was awful, Toby shouted, pointing the gun directly in the girl's face. Instead of being shaken or reacting with any sort of fear, the cashier rolled her eyes back again, smiled, and quivered at his words. Diastatus. Toby turned to look back at me. Disappointment demon. He said this as if I would know what the fuck. With one sweep of his arm, Toby grabbed the girl by her neck, lifted her in the air, slid her across the counter with an audible squeak, and threw her into the dining area, where her small body toppled a series of chairs like a bowling ball before log-rolling under a table. I watched her spin off into the distance, then looked back to see Toby already hopping the counter. Demon fuckers. He shouted in a blind rage. 2 employees moved to stop him in a pincer formation, 1 at each side. They grabbed his arms to restrain him, but 2 diminutive emo girls weren't much of a match for life-size G.I. Joe. Just as soon as they grabbed onto him, he swung his arms together, bashing their heads together. All the while, the employees never lost their blank, blissful expressions. As they crumpled to the floor, I watched, paralyzed with dread and horror, as he put a bullet in each of them. The sound of the gunshots hurt my ears despite the fact I was standing a good several feet away. More shots rang out as Toby went into the back. I could only see the top of his head over the equipment at times as I heard clattering, crashing, the wet crackling sound of bones breaking, punctuated only by the occasional gunshot and Toby screaming, "Demon fuckers," at the top of his voice. It went on forever, like when, for whatever reason, an injured animal keeps hanging on to life despite the fact its unforgiving, unceremonious death a foregone conclusion. Fighting, clattering, fighting, smashing, fighting. I had covered my ears and found myself wishing for everyone working there to die already, just so the spectacle would be over. When I couldn't hear the bangs through my hands, I pulled them away from my ears and waited. Everything was eerily silent at that point, other than the beeping of a timer on a deep fryer. Come on. I heard Toby's voice next to me and nearly jumped out of my skin. Turning to see him there, I noticed a healthy amount of what looked like black oil spattered all over his clothes. What's all over you? Thrall goop. What? I'm not explaining 2 things in one day. Come on. Toby led me behind the counter, his hand on my shoulder as he almost pushed me forward with each shaking, uneasy step. We passed the first girls he had shot, black liquid pooling around the bullet holes in their heads. I know it's not my imagination. They were still smirking. To say the other girls were brutally massacred would not do justice to the level of deranged carnage that laid before me. Limbs gone, innards spilled, bones protruding. There's probably some sort of poetic justice in turning a fast food restaurant into a slaughterhouse, but I'm still too sick over the sight to make light of it. We walked past motionless body after motionless body, including one draped over the beeping deep fryer, her head sizzling in the oil. I probably should have told you not to look at them, Toby realized. We stopped at the freezer. What's in there? I asked, already seeing where this was going. Or do I not want to know? No, I want to know what's in there. Easy answer. The demon. Once they're on our plane of existence, they seek out cold. It's like finally putting a salve on a 3rd-degree burn you've had since the dawn of time. Toby pulled open the freezer door as a frosty cloud of mist spilled out. Hey! Toby shouted. You fucking get out of there, you lil shit! No response. The lights flickered, then died, leaving us in a pitch darkness. Yeah, real melodramatic. Toby sneered, unimpressed with the theatrics. Personally, I was about to burst into tears. A single light came to life within the freezer, nearly blinding us before our eyes adjusted. A secondary red light, for emergency lighting I suppose, gave us a barely visible glimpse of what was inside. Sitting in the center of the freezer, on a throne of burger patty boxes, was a grizzled old miner in a burger helmet with a headlamp, one that was now shining directly on us. Son of a bitch. My fear was replaced with a sort of slowly growing sense of madness. It's Picky Pete, the burger load prospector. A slow growl, inhuman in nature and undefined in location, echoed around us. You've hit the burger load, it rumbled. Picky. Pete looked emaciated, desiccated, worm-eaten and dried out, like a cadaver trapped in a cave-in for countless years. It sat motionless in its place of high importance, tattered overalls rippling ever so slightly with the freezer's cooling breeze. Toby still had his hand on my shoulder. His grip firmed as he no doubt knew I was about to flee from this encounter entirely. Dig. These prices. The voice rumbled again. Unearth. Savings. Wait, so the demon is impersonating a fast food mascot? Or was the mascot always a demon? I don't get it. I was no closer to regaining my sanity, but some gnawing questions were bubbling to the surface. A dystitis feeds on heartbreak, sadness, woe, negative, depressive emotions. Toby seemed unfazed by the creature. A place like this is perfect for that. It's not the real Picky Pete. It just came here like a spider moving into an abandoned web. So it's basically just a parasite? I felt my heartbeat stabilizing, and the bile in my gut was starting to settle down. Exactly. Well, I'm not gonna lie. I started the sentence, and halfway through I saw Toby turn to me, his expression dropping from self-assured to pure concern. That's incredibly disappointing. Laughter rumbled through the building as darkness fell once again, and when the red emergency light returned, Picky Pete was standing directly in front of us. Ask about joining the burger load. Family. Today. It seized Toby and me by our throats, and all at once I could feel my windpipe closing. Struggle as I might, all I could do was frantically claw pieces of musty, dead flesh from Picky Pete's forearms with my fingernails. I can't believe you fed him! Toby managed to get the words out as he choked. Kill it! I gasped. Kill it! Toby unloaded countless bullets into Picky Pete's stomach and chest, but to no effect. Opposite. Toby wheezed. I knew he couldn't be killed, but I sure fucking could. What? I choked. Opposite disappointed. Proud. Toby did his best to snap Picky Pete's fingers, but each break reset itself as the demon mascot laughed its ass off. Say you're proud. Proud to have me for brother. I coughed and gagged. Proud. You're my brother. There was no sound other than the two of us losing air and starting to black out. Even Picky Pete was dead quiet as he looked to me, then to Toby. Oh, wow. Damn, Picky Pete boomed. You? Not really. Proud? The hurt in Toby's voice was audible, even if his voice itself was strained and stifled. All I could do with my final moments of life was shrug. I could feel the cold climb up my limbs, all the way to my head, as I passed out and everything went black. My eyes opened. I could see light. They closed again. My eyes opened. I could see a pair of old mining boots. They closed again. My eyes opened. I could see Toby leaning over me, slapping me across the face. I couldn't feel, though. I just saw his hand approaching repeatedly, followed by the room seeming to shake after each blow. Sound started to filter back through my ears. First, a ringing, then the dull hum of the freezer, then the distorted sound of Toby's voice. Not. Get the fuck up. I don't lose my men. Ever. I sat up, shivering and numb, either from my surroundings or from regaining consciousness in waves. Toby seemed relieved as he stood over me, wiping red drool from his mouth and chin. I turned, my head slightly to see Picky Pete lying on the icy floor, his head obliterated and slowly melting in a splatter of demon blood spew. In my hazy state of mind, the demon's skull reminded me of a serving of cherry-flavored shaved ice that had been dropped on a hot sidewalk. Toby helped me to my feet for the second time that day. I should have been thankful, but I wasn't. The first thing I said after coming back from the brink of death was, "You could have done that at any time." "Yeah," Toby said flatly, putting his hands on his hips as he looked down at the dead being. "Why didn't you do that sooner? Hell, why didn't you do that to start off with? What was up with that shit about being proud of you?" For a solid minute, it seemed Toby had no answers to give. Then he spoke just as flatly as ever. Deep-seated need for validation from others. "Did you bring me here just so I'd be impressed?" "Yeah." I guess I'm not the only one who ended up with a complex or two. What now? I kicked Picky Pete's boot just to be sure. Want to eat him? Toby asked very directly. What? No. God, no. Lot of good reasons, too. Always full. Acid spit. I guess there's not a lot, but there's 2 reasons and they're good ones. Dude, I already said no. Yeah, not everyone has the stomach for it. Back outside, the world seemed like it had been put on pause while we were gone. There was no traffic due to the closed roads, and in looking around the empty parking lot, I realized that there had never been any cars for the employees to get to and from work. Things were eerily peaceful, especially in comparison to what I had just witnessed. Toby marched his way to his truck and pulled the tarp off of the back. Very few things would have surprised me in that moment, and the explosive barrels weren't one of them. I watched him roll the barrels into the restaurant, one after the other after the other. At no point did I offer to help out of both self-preservation and resentment in equal measure. Time to get out of range and light it up. Toby held a remote detonation device in his hand as he got back into the driver's seat. I thought for a moment, then drew in a sharp breath and pointed at him. Wait! I ran into the building that was now housing rather a lot of explosives. When I came back out the double doors, I was dragging along the cashier, the one Toby had throttled and thrown under a table. She was dead weight, but she was breathing. I dragged her by the leg, trailing her hat and name tag behind her on the pavement. Fuck no, Toby yelled from the driver's side window as I approached. You can't bring one home. It's not a minor meal toy. What the fuck is wrong with you? She's alive, I insisted. It's not even real. Well, whatever she is, real or not, she's breathing and her heart is beating. Its heart is beating thrall goop. So what? You want me to throw her back in to get blown up? Very obviously, yes. I hefted the girl into the bed of the pickup and rolled her in until she was face down in a slick of what must have been very flammable liquids. While Toby didn't like the idea, he didn't intervene as I closed the back of the truck and came around to the passenger's seat. Don't trust it. Get rid of it when it wakes up. He didn't look at me as we drove off. I'm not keeping her, man. That's a really weird thing to say. I just didn't think it was right. Whatever. A moment passed before he spoke up again. Don't fuck it. Jesus Christ, dude. Toby took one hand off the wheel, pulled the detonator out of his cup holder, and pressed the button. When we pulled into the neighborhood, Toby began to drive slowly. This was unusual for him. We passed by an intership delivery truck, then another, and so on. As we slow-rolled the block, it seemed as if most every resident had a delivery from an intership truck at that very moment. Most were parked in driveways, some were on the side of the road. If I hadn't noticed Toby giving each single one the stink eye, I probably would have looked right past the ridiculous amount of delivery trucks. As if he knew what I was going to ask, Toby spoke up. The CRP. He pulled into a fenced-in yard and kept the truck idling. Get in the back and pull the tarp over you. I did as I was told immediately. If there was one thing I had learned thus far, it was that I was 100% not ready to handle anything he handled on a regular basis. In the back of the truck, under the tarp, I took a second look at the cashier. Luckily, she was still out like a light, but her eyelids were fluttering, so it probably wasn't going to be long before she woke up and screeched and ran away or whatever thralls do. I could see now that her eyes were blank, soulless orbs. The teeth hidden behind black stained. Lips were razor-sharp points, all of them. For some reason, I didn't feel any more safe under that tarp than outside of it. The truck rolled to a stop. I have no idea where. Golden Boy. I heard an unfamiliar voice, garbled like it was being filtered through a voice changer. What are you guys doing here? Bad boy. Thought we could trust you. Many years. Going rogue? Off the grid? I visited my parents. Off the grid. Rogue. Agree to disagree, I guess. Are you cleaning them? My heart raced. Cleaning them? My parents? What did that mean? Killing them? Have to. No choice, no memory. Your fault entirely. Fuck off. Incorrect. You fuck off. Bitch, I will come out of this truck and put a piece of you in every garbage can, on the end of every driveway, in front of every house in this idyllic little fucking community. Violent threat, lost your cool, I win the debate. Fucking fine. I relaxed a bit, cleaning their memories. That was at least not as extreme or final. Toby drove off again, and again we came to a stop. Come on out. I slowly lifted the tarp and slid up over the side of the truck bed, falling onto the ground on my back. Toby had driven up beside my house in a spot concealed by fences and trees. Go home. Mom and Dad won't remember anything that happened in the past 24 to 72 hours. That's kind of a big window. Dusting myself off, I stood there in the yard with Toby. He didn't seem happy, mad, sad. He didn't seem affected by anything in any way. So they won't remember you? I asked, thinking that must bother him in at least some way, but not having enough tact to approach it differently. I figured as much when I came here. I knew what I was getting into. Well, except for having a brother, I guess. I'll still remember you, right? Yeah. The CRP doesn't know who you are. I guess it's good I never amounted to anything. I laughed. Toby nodded, unironically agreeing with the statement. He then gestured to the truck bed. Get that piece of shit out of my truck. He hopped back behind the wheel as I rolled the cashier onto the ground with a heavy thud. Since you're keeping your memory, he called out as he made a wide turn, eating up the grass again. You'll remember not to fuck it, right? As Toby peeled out and drove away, I flipped him off. But yeah, later that evening she woke up, screeched, and ran away. No one remembers Toby showing back up. My parents don't remember seeing him. The neighbors don't remember him revving his engine. He essentially went back to being deceased as far as anyone other than me is concerned. My parents aren't sure why my bedroom is full of Toby's things. Again, all meticulously placed just as he left them 18 years ago. They don't know who tore up the lawn, and they're confused about where exactly the past few days went. I told them they're just getting old and probably have early onset dementia. When I think back to Toby's visit, I no longer hate my dumb dead brother. I dislike my dumb living brother. I guess that's probably how most people feel about their siblings anyway. This is pretty much all I have to say about everything that happened on that day. Don't hold out for a part 2. There are 3 types of people. Those who hear stories, those who write them, and those who live them. I think I'm going to be the third one now.